What's your mental health on a scale of 1 to 10?
I was gonna say 8, but after I met your puppy, it might be at a 10, I have to be honest.
Hi guys, welcome to my show. Welcome to my living room.
It's gorgeous. I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Welcome back to another episode of Looking For. I'm Amelie, and today we are looking for mental health support. I'm here with my guests, Jaci Marie Smith and Haley Caddes. Haley is the founder and CEO of the Chill Pill app, a social platform for young women to receive anonymous peer support online for mental well-being. And Jaci is an entrepreneur, content creator, and podcaster who writes about tips and tricks to build a healthy, well-rounded life. So how are you guys doing today? What's your mental health on a scale of 1 to 10?
Mine is pretty good. I'd say we're at a 7.
Good.
You know, I'm visiting my grandparents here, so that's always amazing.
Yeah, that's nice.
I was gonna say 8, but after I met your puppy, it might be at a 10, I have to be honest.
We have to do a puppy intro.
Oh,
This is my
puppy
emotional
check.
support animal. My other one is
Yes.
too big for the chair.
He is everything.
But this is Moose.
We love him. Hi, Moose. Oh my God. I can't.
It's perfect. We love him. Okay, well, that's great.
Yeah, I was
Really
gonna
good
say,
mental health.
now that life is kind of getting more into like a hustle and bustle than it used to be, just the past few years with everything going on, I feel like I have developed this like anxiety around being social. I used to be very social. I've always considered myself an outgoing person, and now when I have like events or things to go to, I feel like I shut down a little bit. So it's like getting back into the swing of things lately.
That's good. I definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
I was already an introvert, and then the pandemic hit, and now my social battery is minuscule.
Yes.
Yeah.
Would you
Yeah,
consider-
I'm a big extrovert.
Okay.
So like the last, 6 months I've been thriving. I feel like I'm
Good.
back in my element. And yeah, so I've been getting to meet so many new people, just starting a company and everything. So I've been thriving. I've been loving it. But
Oh, I'm glad.
yeah.
Well, so tell me a little bit about your app.
Yeah, so I started this app about a year ago now, and then we fully launched in May of this year.
Congratulations.
And it's for female identifying, non-binary young people, Gen Z 13 to 24, where they can receive anonymous peer support online, where you join the app. We only have avatars. You can choose any username
Nice.
you want to keep your identity private, and you can find essentially friends your age who can relate to whatever you're going through.
That's really nice. So how did you come up with that idea?
Well, I actually copied a lot from Alcoholics Anonymous and 12-step programs, which I used to be a part of. And, those are great because those meetings don't have therapists, and they don't really have to be moderated because you can only share about your experience, what you're going through. So I was like, that has gotten millions of people sober around the world.
Yeah.
Like, we can bring this, make it more broad and general to
Yeah.
teenage girls. So... and just made it audio only. So again, I was like
really
so
nice.
done with video from
Yeah.
Zoom and everything. And yeah, so now we're growing, and it's been so amazing getting to work with teenage girls and their mental health.
So is it like a group phone call that people
Pretty
like?
much. We
Okay.
have a little chill pill cafe. So your
cute.
avatar is like sitting around like these cute little tables, getting coffee and everything. So
cute.
yeah, it's really fun. So
really
we made it
cute.
cute.
Yeah.
It's making me think of like Club Penguin or Webkins,
Yeah.
but in the
Literally
best
that.
way.
Yeah.
We have like virtual support animals now, like
Yeah.
Neopets vibes.
That's
so.
really nice. So as mentioned today, Haley, Jaci, and I are here to normalize the conversation around mental health. We are going to get into the nitty-gritty around dating someone with mental health diagnoses, or if you yourself are struggling. We will also see how you can set yourself up for success when it comes to your own mental wellness. So I kind of just want to preface this episode before we even get into anything that whether you've struggled with anxiety or depression for ever how long it may have been, your whole life or just recently, just know you're not alone. So to start off, what have your mental health experiences been like?
For me, just in the past few years and like in my 20s specifically, when I started struggling more with mental health stuff, I felt like I didn't want to burden anyone. That's been like a huge theme in my life, is like I don't want to complain to other people because I don't want to burden them and make them stressed out about me or anything like that. But the irony is that I don't care when people do that to me, like I would love to, if my friends vent to me or are having a struggle, like I love to try and help and listen to them. But I think that's been something I've been learning this past year, and I'm grateful that mental health isn't such a taboo topic anymore on social media and stuff. I feel like it's becoming very normalized, which I'm so grateful for, because it's even pushed me to be okay opening up to like my closest friends and family around me when I am struggling. And I've found that I rarely regret like opening up, because it usually just makes me feel so much better.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I go through phases with my mental health, as I'm sure everyone does. I have great days. I have days where I'm feeling stressed and anxious and overwhelmed and not super happy. And I think another thing, we were actually talking about this right before we recorded, is just allowing yourself to feel those emotions and not like try and push them down, because that's also been another thing that I've done a lot in my life, is just if I'm feeling sad or something, like shaming myself and being like, I have so much to be grateful for, I need to just push this down. But what I found is it always makes it worse, and it always kind of builds up inside me. So that's been something I've been learning lately and trying to really do, is just being vocal and being open, because it's nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah. 100%.
I can totally relate to that. That has been a huge part of my mental health journey too, is just like releasing the judgment I have around whatever I'm feeling, you know, because I'll tell myself, oh, you should be feeling a certain way, you know, over this breakup or over this, I don't know, class I'm taking, and that always just makes it a lot harder for me to actually process my emotions and really like accept me for who I am. But yeah, I mean, I have been working on my mental health since I was about 15. I really struggled with undiagnosed mental illness when I was a teenager. I mean, technically still do now, but we're doing much better. And, you know, at that time, it really wasn't talked about a lot at all. And so I kind of spiraled into a lot of behaviors. Like, I really struggled with self-harm. I struggled with substance abuse. And it got to the point where I was sent to a residential treatment program and like wilderness therapy for my last 2 years of high school. And so if you've seen the Paris Hilton documentary, it's the troubled teen industry. So that's what I talk about almost exclusively on TikTok. So the whole story is there.
Got it.
But anyway, so, you know, I came from a really, really like clinical setting all day, every day, to then going right to college, to then moving to New York, being in my 20s. And like, it's just ebbed and flowed. It totally goes in phases. And I don't know, but I don't regret having to work on my mental health from such a young age, because I feel like it's set me up for success. And now I finally get to kind of give back all that work. So
how was the transition between like being in an intensive program to like readjusting to life in college, which is like the epitome of like struggle,
right?
in all ways.
It was kind of hilarious thinking back, because there it's, you know, I was there with 50 other teenage girls. You know, we didn't talk to anyone outside of that school besides our family, like pretty much locked down. And I left, and 2 months later immediately was a freshman in college.
Wow.
So I was like, boys, like, you know, drugs, alcohol, there's all these things that I hadn't had exposure to in pretty much 2 years. So I kind of had to relearn a lot of social skills, actually. But it was also nice, because at that point I had been talking about my mental health so much, and it being in a program like that, what it did was destigmatize that a lot for me. So I was able to feel like I could be really open with that and like my journey from day one. I honestly overshared when I first went to college, so I've toned it back a little
We can all relate. The lack of boundaries has been strong. Telling people my whole story.
So do you talk a lot about your mental health on TikTok?
I would say I talk more about it on my podcast.
Okay.
So I host a podcast with my best friend, and we recently did an episode called In Our Therapy Era, and kind of had like a live little therapy session. And I feel like our main goal with the podcast is to make people feel just very normal and not alone, because we do a lot of like listener write-in situations where people will write in for advice. And such a common thread is people being, you know, saying, oh, I feel this way, but I feel ashamed that I feel that way. And I feel like on our podcast, we just try so hard to be like, oh my gosh, do not feel dumb about that. Do not feel ashamed. Like, that is so normal. You know, we all have things we've done that we're not proud of, whatever. We want to make the people listening to our podcast feel like they're in a safe environment where they're included and they don't, you know, feel shame or anything for any way that they feel.
Yeah, I feel like there's such a polarized opinion on therapy itself. And I'm in therapy. I love therapy. I think everyone should be in therapy. I just think it's so helpful for things you might not even realize you struggle with. What do you guys think should be done, or not should be done, but like what are your guys' thoughts on like the polarization of therapy? Do you guys believe in therapy?
I mean, yes, I definitely do. I've been in therapy pretty much, for I guess maybe 12 years now straight. And like I said, I had really intensive, and like I've gone now, it's like once a week, right? But I also think it's kind of a journey, because I think it's a hard leap to go from, hey, I'm struggling, like maybe for the first time in my life with mental health. I don't know if it's depression, anxiety, I don't know what it is. I don't know if this is normal or not, but it feels like a big leap to go from like, oh, I'm starting to struggle with something, to, okay, I'm going to go to therapy about it. And just having like been a teenager and working with teenagers a lot, that's what I hear them saying a lot, which totally makes sense. Of course, I think like, I almost think there needs to be some type of middle ground, which is like, a community where you can, like even your podcast, even call in and share more openly in a space, which I don't think that replaces therapy, but I also think it's like it can be a part of, your mental health toolkit and be, sometimes just as helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's awesome. And I think it's needed for, specific people. Maybe different types of therapy work better for different people or whatever. And I do think you need to find a therapist that you really trust and you feel safe with. Like one of my friends just started therapy, and she went and she was like, I just didn't feel like the therapist was like getting what I was saying. And then a few weeks later, she tried a different therapist, and she was like, oh my gosh, so that's what it's supposed to be like. Like she totally just made me feel better and helped me find tools, to handle certain things in my life. And so I think finding the right person is super important, but anything that makes you a better person, that makes you feel less alone, that makes you feel more validated in these struggles should never be, taboo or looked down upon. Like, I think it's super helpful.
Yeah, I'm with you. So as we know, struggling with anxiety or depression is very normal and should not be taboo. And it also should not and does not determine your worth or even your ability to date. How have you guys maintained your dating life and also your mental health?
I'm married now, but I can still speak to this because, still dated for a time period. And I think there's so many factors that go into this. I think it's super important to have like practices that you do for yourself that have nothing to do with your partner, that help you be just, the healthiest, happiest version of yourself. For me, recently I've been journaling, and, it's one of those things where people are like, go on a morning walk, journal. And I'm like, yada, yada. And then like I started doing it. I'm like, oh, it works. Like, it's just very helpful, Not saying that's going to cure everything, but I think having self-care practices in place so that you can be the most confident, happy, healthy version of yourself is super important just while you're in a relationship, before you get into a relationship. But I also read something recently. It was like some relationship advice saying that, basically a healthy relationship and the person you're with, you should never feel like you have to hide certain parts of yourself. And I think that's extremely important to remember. And like, I feel so lucky that I'm married, but I can trust my husband with anything, and I don't feel like I have to hide if I'm having a bad day or anything like that. And I've dated people in the past where I didn't feel that safety with. And that's, I think something that's important to look for in a partner. And just being open and communicating, and anyone who is worth dating, that should not make them run away from you.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. With the self-care piece, I'm like too lazy to write in a journal, so I voice memo journal. Ooh, so just pro tip, because I tried to force myself to write in a journal for years, and then just now I voice memo. But I also agree, like my experience so I've been like single and in multiple relationships throughout my 20s. So and most of that's in New York. And so you're meeting a lot of people, you can date a lot. Like I'm an extrovert, so I kind of enjoy it too. And so I think like one of the biggest things I've learned in therapy too is I have to be able to accept those parts of myself that I may be ashamed of for whatever reason before I can be fully open with honestly anyone, even friends, you know. And so doing my own work on myself and being like, hey, it's okay, I've been through this, it's okay, I'm like this, or just figuring out what I need to do for self-care was so important. And I've just seen how much better my relationships have gotten with very different people throughout, you know, the last 10 years or so because of the work I've put in outside of a relationship. And now I can go on a first date and just be like, you know, they're like, hey, how are you? And I just try to be super honest. Like if I've had a bad day, I'll be like, no, I had a really terrible day. And here's why. Because like worst case scenario, it's a first date, you don't go on another one. And I'd rather know that up front than try to act like super chill girl all the time. So I've just kind of leaned into being really open with my mental health.
That's great. So speaking of mental health and being in relationships, Bumble actually has a safety and well-being center that offers resources around mental exhaustion, feelings of rejection, and so on. Their app can even send you directly to several crisis text lines, the first being Crisis Text Line, which is free 24/7 support for those in crisis from a trained counselor. The second is Love is Respect, which disrupts and prevents unhealthy relationships and intimate violence. The third is Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which is confidential support for people in crisis. So how do you guys talk about your mental health in the early stages of dating?
I think just being open from the get-go, like you said. I don't think, you know, it's like I was saying earlier, you want to make sure that you trust this person and you feel safe with them before you're just like spilling all of these, you know, parts of yourself maybe. But I do think it's important to be honest from the start about how you're feeling day to day, about maybe what you struggle with, whatever it is. And like I said, whoever you're dating or your partner, it's actually very telling how they respond to you and how they react to those things. And I think it's like you said, better off knowing from the get-go. If they're like, oh, that's kind of whatever, it's like, this is probably not going to work because I want someone who makes me feel just like whole and safe and all of those things. So I think it's actually a great thing to talk about because it gives you insight into if you could really, you know, if this is a good match for you.
How do you prevent, maybe it's not prevent, but how do you make sure that you're not like trauma dumping on them?
I feel like, it's important to have boundaries. You know, and oh my gosh, I wish I knew. It's like I was saying earlier, I feel like I have struggled with boundaries in the past where it's like I will meet someone and just immediately like almost word vomit all of these things. Like I told her my life story already. She already knows everything while we were waiting out there. Like, but some things are okay to be like private and sacred to you. And I think that's something I'm literally just now learning, like this past year, is I don't have to verbalize every thought that comes into my head and I don't have to verbalize every struggle. Sometimes I can just, you know, it's not that I have to deal with it all alone, but sometimes that's actually like healthy and I can, you know, journal about things and have my own relationship with myself. I don't always have to talk about it to every single person, you know?
Yeah. One thing one of my friends said to me once that I really loved about this was not everyone has earned your vulnerability yet.
For sure.
And so I really like that because I did the same thing. Like just, I felt like I was keeping a secret from people if I didn't tell them like my whole backstory, including like a lot of traumatic things from childhood that, again, I ended up telling a lot of people who maybe couldn't be trusted or really just didn't deserve it. So I almost approach it, I have like tears in my head of different, you know, mental health related things I've been through that some of which I'm very comfortable sharing. I'll share on TikTok, literally. And then all the way down to the stuff that I'm like, I really have to trust you. Often I'm already in a committed relationship with that person before I even tell them a lot of those things because I know I've, you know, put in a ton of work on my side to heal from these experiences. So I know it's like, it's not that I'm hiding something from them so much anymore. It's more just like, I'm keeping it private. It doesn't really affect the relationship as much as it used to when I was younger. And so that's okay to like keep those sacred. I really like that. Yeah.
So what are some of the signs that like your mental health is affecting your relationships?
I think for me, feeling like insecure or just projecting things onto my partner, you know, just being like, sometimes you know, life is a mirror a lot of times. And sometimes when you're feeling like you're not doing enough or whatever, it's really because you feel guilty that you're not taking care of yourself or things like that. And so I feel like a very telltale sign for me specifically is when I start just being very critical of everyone around me or of my partner. And I realize it's because I need to look inward and do some work on myself.
Yeah, I think for me, it really is when I notice I'm compromising on some of my boundaries or even some like deal breakers in relationships. I'll all of a sudden be like, oh no, it's fine if you do that. And that really just means for me now, I'm like, I'm feeling insecure for whatever reason. I'm hiding parts of myself usually. And so I kind of just look for, how real can I feel around this person? How safe do I feel? And if not, then if it's not already affecting my mental health, it will probably in the near future.
Yeah, that makes sense. Another question. These are complicated, and you guys aren't therapists, so you don't have to give me therapy answers. But I'm just thinking off the top of my head. What about an instance where a young female is in a friendship or a relationship with someone who goes through something really traumatic, and then they feel trauma bonded to you?
Yeah, that's a good question.
This is a hard one. I don't feel like I can speak to this specific experience.
Yeah, I think, I've definitely been on kind of both sides of that equation, especially in a friendship, honestly. And, in some ways, I think the trauma bonding, you have to have a high level of emotional intelligence and probably have already done some work in therapy to understand your own trauma, to be able to not trauma dump on a person or not fully have to, maybe codependently rely on someone because it feels too hard to rely on yourself, which that's a totally valid feeling. But I think with that, honestly, it just all starts with self-awareness. So if you know, okay, hey, this person is going through something traumatic and I kind of know what trauma bonding is. And I want to be there for them. I would just do research on it. Me personally, I literally would, and just be, hey, how do I best help someone like this? And, filter that through the lens of, okay, but I know my friend. And so what do they need? And more often than not, I just try to follow their lead in a lot of ways if they're going through something really tough. And I'm a big acts of service person, so oftentimes how I'll show support without having to really trauma bond is just be hey, maybe they want to find a therapist. It's so hard to find a therapist, right? I'll offer to help them search through psychologytoday.com and schedule appointments and stuff like that, because sometimes those little things or seemingly little things are so hard to do when you're going through something like that. Yeah,
that's a great answer. Thank you.
Definitely.
So how can you help a partner when they're going through a mental crisis?
I think the number one thing is just listening, honestly. And I know that sounds so simple, but I also have been kind of I have this problem-solving personality where I like to fix problems. Immediately when a friend comes to me, it's in my nature to just be okay, how can we make this better? Maybe you could do this. And I've just realized over time, even when I open up to people, I'm not even necessarily looking for a solution, especially if you're feeling anxious or depressed. It's there's maybe not even something specific, as long as they just listen and they're hey, I understand that you feel that way, or I'm sorry for that. They just validate you in that way. That honestly is what has personally helped me the most, is literally just someone sitting there and listening with no agenda. So
I totally agree. And I think the biggest thing I've learned too is not to take whatever they're going through personally. Easier said than done, obviously. But if I'm feeling, any type of way about whatever they're going through, those feelings are totally valid. But I'll usually take those feelings and get support from a friend or someone outside of that relationship, because I've also been the person, having a mental health struggle. And I would appreciate when, my partner wouldn't, because sometimes it feels like they're blaming you, even if they aren't, for whatever they're going through just because you're struggling. So that was kind of the biggest hack I learned when, supporting a partner through anything like that.
That's great. I think a lot of the times it comes down to self-awareness, and knowing that when you feel a certain way, like it might not be the truth. Feelings are not always facts.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like especially when it comes to rejection, whether you're swiping on Bumble and that person doesn't match with you, or whether you don't get a job, or someone doesn't want to go on a date with you, or a friend doesn't want to be your friend anymore. We kind of face rejection in so many different facets in this life. And how do you know that isn't like personal? Like, how do you not let that ruin your whole day, week, month, or send you down a spiral of like mental health struggle?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, it takes work outside of that relationship or dating or whatever it may be. For me, the more and more I've noticed my self-esteem has just grown over the years, the easier it is to like be rejected from things.
Yeah.
And relationships are definitely the hardest thing for me personally to be rejected from. But at the same time, if I have something outside of my romantic relationships, if I have, and it can be anything for anyone, like it could be work, it could be something you're doing volunteering, a hobby, a passion, even friend groups and friendships. If I know I always have that to lean on and to fall back on, that kind of makes the blows like a little less harsh for me.
Yeah.
And so I've tried to work on developing myself and relationships outside of romantic situations a lot, and that's really helped.
Yeah.
That's really good. I read something recently that said that, you know, rejection, or when someone doesn't want to go on a date with you or whatever, has so much more to do. It has everything to do with compatibility and nothing to do with your inherent worth.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important to remember in every facet of life, whether it's dating, friendships, a job, anything. It's like, some people just, you're not compatible with everyone.
Yeah.
And that is totally okay. It has nothing to do with your actual worth as a human being. And literally it has to do with someone's preferences, how they grew up, what they like. Like, it doesn't have to do with you. And that's so much easier said than done, to not take things personally, especially when dating, because I think that can just like really be a hit to your ego if someone's like, oh, I don't want to go on a date with you, or I don't like you, or something like that. But this is something I always talk about on my podcast too, is like, you deserve to be with someone who adores you and who's just so into you and loves every part of you. And, you know, why would we settle for someone who doesn't get you, or who's like, I don't really, you know what I mean? So it's like, if that happens, I say it's a blessing in disguise. Let's move on and find the right person, you know?
Yeah. So unfortunately, we're running out of time, but this has been such a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate you both opening up and being vulnerable and talking about things that can be really scary to talk about. So I appreciate that.
Thank you for having us.
Thank
It was
you.
great.
Yeah.
Of course. Thank you. If you're single or actively dating, please remember these things as you like move forward. You can develop a support group. You can seek affordable therapy options. Remember that you should know your boundaries, what you will do and what you won't do. Journal about your experiences and track past dates. See what types of events excite you, see what scares you, see what you don't like on a date, see what you do like. Like, at the end of the day, this is about you. It's not about if they like you, it's about if you like them. And stay grounded, you know that there's no shame and that you're definitely not alone. Any lasting tips or words of wisdom?
Oh man, just work on you.
Yeah.
That is the most important foundation, is the relationship you have with yourself, and it bleeds into every area of life, specifically dating.
Yeah.
So I think the more confident you become, which all those things you just mentioned can help with your confidence level, and just becoming a better version of yourself and being confident, even struggling with mental health, you can still be so confident. That's so important to remember. It's not like you have to wait, for you to be perfect with your mental health to be worthy and confident. And I think just the more you work on realizing that, not being ashamed of things, you will be a better partner, you will find a better partner, and it'll all just be great.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I'd say just, whatever you're feeling is valid. Like, point blank. And it can be feelings of rejection, it can be insecurity, it can be sadness, happiness, anxiety. It's all valid, and like, you're not alone. So that's what's helped me most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to Looking For. I am Amelie Zilber, and I will be back with another episode next week, brought to you by Bumble right here on the Past Your Bedtime YouTube channel.